A wonderful evening to you, Nigerians. Welcome to the maiden edition of your show. We call it The New Deal, and it's a brainchild of the Obidient TV. Now, just in case you're wondering what this could be, The New Deal is a show that reminds us of a Nigeria that we all can be proud of. Don't forget that over the years, we've had a Nigeria that we all really can boldly, identify with when we get outside of this country. And so New Deal today is, coming on this table for the first time. And I can tell you, it promises to be an enjoyable time. My name is Waju, Akin-Emmanuels. Friends call me the Dynamo. Guess what, guys? I will be your host. Today, we have a special guest. You know what they say? When you start a show with such a massive personality, an individual that anytime his name is mentioned, political juggernauts and those who have been able to hold this nation down to its knees are really scared of that name. I'm talking about an investigative journalist and someone who has already carved a niche for himself, having recently been awarded, forgive me, I lost that. David, please remind me what you just got. Sorry.
Most recent, there have been a number. Okay, so last week I was named the GRC Anti-Fin Crime Reporter of the Year for 2022, and then yesterday I was listed among the 100 most influential Africans of 2022 by New African magazine, if that's what you're referring to.
Most influential Africans. Thank you. Okay, right. Sorry. So I'll just take it from there. So, this is a young individual who is really putting Nigeria's name on the world map with his achievements in terms of journalism. Just recently, he was actually named among the 100 young Africans, making Africa as a continent very proud. Today is an honor to play host to this young man. He goes by the name David Hundeyin. And I tell you, I feel so elated to really do this with him. David, how are you tonight?
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
Okay, let's go to the chase, David. You have been a sort of sensation, on social media recently. You seem to be the one giving a major blow to those that consider themselves as the powers that be in Nigeria. First and foremost, I'm going to ask you, why did you decide to do your kind of journalism the way you do it?
Well, simply because when you understanding of something, as I was, certainly between 2014 and 2017, I was constantly complaining because during that period, I was working in the marketing and media space, although I wasn't practicing as a journalist. But I saw sort of firsthand what was done to get Buhari into office in a journalistic sense, in a media sense, in a marketing sense. And I would always complain about how I felt as if Nigerian journalists weren't doing their job, or they have been compromised, they have been bought over, and the entire space had a huge ethical problem, and nobody was actually holding power accountable. Everybody was actually looking for how to get into bed with power, and I was just constantly complaining, comparing it with the that I was used to in the UK, where media is actually a powerful institution in its own right, and the government is actually afraid of the media, which is how it's supposed to be. So the dog actually wags the tail there. It's not the other way around. And I'll complain that in Nigeria, it's always the tail wagging the dog. So in 2019, when the opportunity came about to potentially launch myself into the Nigerian space, because I've been doing some work by that time in the international space. I'd already won some international recognition at that point. I'd been nominated for the US International Visitors Leadership Program by the US State Department. I'd appeared in the New Yorker magazine. Some of my work had appeared in a Netflix documentary. So I was well known outside of Nigeria, but nobody in Nigeria knew who I was. But then I got the opportunity to start doing some work in Nigeria, almost by accident, and it took off. It did really well, and the first ever proper investigative story that I did which was in July 2019. It was a story about Badagry General Hospital. The aftermath of that story, because that shortly before the story was done, the hospital's mortality rate for women doing cesarean section deliveries was 4 out of 10. So 4 out of 10 women who went in there to do a CS delivery wouldn't come out alive. After that story, that figure went down to under 2 out of 10, which is still too many. But for the first time in my life, I realized, okay, something I did actually saved somebody's life, saved lives, in fact. Like, I sat down on my laptop and I wrote something and it actually saved people's lives, literally. Okay, so this is actually that thing I've always been complaining about that Nigerian media doesn't do. And I'm a journalist, but I'm working in the international space where nobody really cares about me. And, all the fantastic work I'm doing, it doesn't really matter anyway, because I'm really just doing it just to submit an invoice at the end of the month and get paid. But this is saving lives in my immediate environment, because I was based in Nigeria at the time. So it was a very easy decision for me at that point to feel like, okay, I want to do more of this. I want to do this again. So when the opportunity with Newswire came up, a lady called Mercy Abang, who runs Newswire, she came to me the following month with a story which she had actually already worked on. She just wanted me to draft it. But then I looked at what she had and I thought I could do more with it. So I asked her for access to her sources and everything that she had. And I did more with it. It was the story you might know as the Abuja raids. And that story did so well that one of the victims in the story, when she went to court with the FCT ministry, and she won the judgment the following month, the justice who delivered the judgment, Justice Binta Mutala, actually referenced my story in the judgment. And this was essentially a judgment that criminalized the practice of kidnapping young women off the streets of Abuja under the guise of cracking down on prostitution, which was what the Abuja Environmental Protection Bureau was doing. So at that point, that was when the light bulb went off. All these things I've been complaining about in Nigerian media and Nigerian journalism are things that aren't actually that difficult to achieve, because if with a relatively platform like Newswire, I was able to, achieve this sort of impact. I didn't need to have a large newsroom behind me. It didn't need to be a big production. I literally just sat down and did this thing in like 48 hours and it had this sort of outsized impact. Then I definitely will do more of this. And clearly I'm good at this. So I want to keep doing more of it. So that was when I sort of made up my mind that, okay, for the next 2-3 years, I'm going to dedicate majority of my energy to this. So I'll still do some of like the regular like opinion columns and writing and copywriting work that I do on the side, and I'll use that to pay my bills. But I want my main core career focus going forward to be this thing, because I've seen that this thing has some kind of an impact, and this is what I want to do.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful one from you, David. You just happened to, come out when the Obidient movement also enjoyed currency in Nigeria. A lot of people have actually accused you of having a personal vendetta against what I call the establishment. First and foremost, before we go to the establishment, let's talk about the Obidient movement. What is your impression of that particular, your perception rather, of that particular movement? I mean, the timing, the folks that are part of that movement. What can you say about it?
So to me, it's very evident that the Obidient movement is, I wouldn't say it's a successor, but it's definitely taking some inspiration from the decentralized organization that young Nigerians put together during the EndSARS protest movement. That seems very clear to my eyes. There are some things that both movements share in common. As I said, it's not a successor to the EndSARS protest movement, and it's very important to make that clear, because there are lots of people who were part of one that are not part of the other. So that should be very clear about that. However, you can pick some clear similarities between both, things that you didn't see before EndSARS in Nigerian public discourse. So, for example, decentralization. There is no leader. Like, there is no leader of the Obidient movement. Peter Obi himself is not a leader of the Obidient movement. That's the fact. It's a completely decentralized movement. It's not, even though it has its name in it, and it's a political movement whose immediate short-term goal is to get him elected into office. He himself is not the focal point, in fact, of this movement. In fact, one refrain that you hear very commonly is that every Nigerian is running for president through this person. I think this was something that we hadn't seen prior to NSAS, because it was during NSAS for the first time that I personally observed such a phenomenon in Nigerian public discourse, where young Nigerians specifically would say that there are no leaders here. Everybody is a hero. Everybody's a leader. Everybody's doing everything of their own volition. Everybody's a volunteer. And even though I have said on some other occasions that NSAS didn't achieve its stated goals, that is not to say that NSAS was a failure, because I think one of the major successes of NSAS was that it demonstrated to the authorities, or to the powers that be, that there can be such a time when a cross-section of Nigerians across religious and ethnic boundaries can stand together for some sort of social or political goal, and it's basically impossible to use the usual tactics to break them apart. That was the first time that had ever been observed in Nigerian history, really.
I like the fact that you just pointed that out. My next question was going to come in that line. That did you ever at any point in your life, in your existence, ever think that Nigerians, young Nigerians as it were, would come together at any point in our history to do what is being done in Nigeria today? The Obi movement, nobody saw it coming. As a matter of fact, very many people would think that the establishment would always have their way. I mean, some of them actually, they're surprised at the moment that we have such a movement that you can't pin to one individual. You just hear someone from the north saying this and that. Did you ever, as a person, as a Nigerian who probably you have lived well over 3 decades, and then you've observed the way things are done in Nigeria, did you ever think that a time would come that Nigerians, young Nigerians who have been bastardized, whose mind has been abused, did you ever think they would come together as we have done at this particular point in time?
I did, but I perhaps didn't think it would happen quickly. I thought that as the internet penetration of Nigeria gets deeper, more and more people have access to relatively cheap, high-speed internet and internet-enabled devices, and the flow of information achieves a velocity that it is completely out of the reach of the powers that be. The access to information and speed of access to information reaches a level that completely takes it out of the realm of the legacy players in Nigeria's political space, that young Nigerians particularly would start to gravitate toward a new sort of political culture, a new social system. What I didn't expect was that it would happen this quickly, because statistically, most of Nigeria only came online maybe within the past decade and a half. Statistically, within the past decade, majority of the 112 million internet lines in Nigeria, according to the NCC, statistically, the majority of them came on stream between 2010 and the present. So just over a decade. So if you were to have asked me this in 2009, that in a little over a decade, do you see Nigerian youth achieve so very unlikely? But again, what this has demonstrated to me is the sheer power of information, the sheer power of access to information. What it has also demonstrated to me is that Nigerians, in fact, are not unintelligent people. Young Nigerians are actually competent people. The problems that Nigeria always had is access to information. And that's why the legacy players have always fought very hard to remain in control of things that provide access to information. So they fought very hard to bastardize Nigeria's education system, for one thing. It's not a coincidence that the budget for Nigeria's National Assembly is greater than the annual budget for Nigeria's education ministry. That's not an accident. That's very deliberate. It's not a coincidence that most of the big and media houses, the TV stations, radio stations, newspapers are owned by politicians or people working for politicians. That's not a coincidence. It's not a coincidence that for so many years after the rest of the world had adopted the GSM standard, Nigeria still remains stubbornly stuck with Nitel, trying to frustrate any attempts at foreign entry into Nigeria's telephony space. And it took the pretty much accidental death of Abacha. And even then, even after President Obasanjo came in, he still faced a fierce amount of pushback when he allowed for foreign investment to come into the telephony space, and he actually opened it up for competition with Nitel, right? All of that was not by accident, because there is a very small group of people in Nigeria who long ago sat down together and decided that they were going to sit down on the destinies of Nigerians, that they are going to prevent light from reaching the minds of Nigerians. They are going to remain tightly in control of everything. So the access to information, which has sort of burgeoned over the past decade, is what has thrown a spanner into these works. The Obidient movement, for example, could not possibly exist were it not for the internet. It's a completely internet-driven phenomenon, whether you accept it or not. Right? Without the internet, it wouldn't be possible, because the tools for communication outside of the internet are all controlled, or would all still be controlled, by these same characters: the radio stations, the TV stations, the newspapers. Information will only move in one direction, and the information you will see is the information that is vetted, the information that it permits you to see. We wouldn't be able to have conversations like this and then post it up on YouTube, and then snippets show up on Twitter or whatever. You wouldn't have such things. So the internet has changed the game, right? And I know they like to say that, elections aren't won on the internet, and those are the narratives they like to put out to sort of try and minimize the very, very outsized impact of the internet. But that is all absolute nonsense. Yes, elections aren't won on the internet. Elections are heavily influenced, however, by what happens on the internet.
David, I must say that you are a journalist delight. Every interviewer would want to have you, because you have a very rich mind, and the way you dissect all of the issues, it's always a beauty. Now, let's go to what I call the major individual that kind of strings all obedience together. I was going to ask you this question if you were obedient, but I think that's a no-brainer for you to actually, I've done some of the things you do. I guess you are. So let me just put the question to you, so that I would not just be assuming on your behalf. Are you obedient? And if you are, what made you to decide to pitch your tent with Peter Obi? And why do you think Peter Obi really can, if not give us that utopian Nigeria, can at least start the process to get there?
Well, yeah, very, very obviously, Peter Obi is my preferred candidate. Unfortunately, I won't be able to vote because I'm in the diaspora, and I live under asylum protection, so I'm not able to return to Nigeria under the terms of my asylum, actually. So I can't vote. But if I were to be able to vote, I would obviously vote for Peter Obi. And in my little space, I've not been shy to express the political preference that I have. And the reason for that choice, I think, is also a no-brainer. It's very simple. Is that there isn't really any competition, to be honest, because how you make choices in the Nigerian context is to look at what is available on the ballot, right? So if the APC's presidential primaries, for example, had thrown up, let me say, a Yemi Osinbajo. Now, this is somebody who would have spent 8 years as part of the Buhari administration. So I personally was fiercely opposed to him. But it would have been a lot more. There would have been a conversation to have. Let me put it that way. Right? If the PDP's primaries had thrown up, first of all, a younger candidate, and then a more credible candidate, there might be a conversation to have. But the two legacy parties decided to double down on the things that made them so awful for Nigeria. They decided to double down on those things, unfortunately. especially the ruling party, especially the APC. So where you have a situation where the choice is between someone who was the youngest bank chairman in Nigeria versus someone who has been indicted in a foreign jurisdiction under the U.S. Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, another person who has been indicted for cross-border international drug trafficking. I think it's a ridiculous conversation to have, to be honest, because it's like trying to compare 9/10 with 0/10 and 1/10. It's a no-brainer. So I don't even think it's something that needs explanation or that needs any kind of conversation. It's stunningly obvious. It's visible to the blind and audible to the deaf.
David, who are you? Who is David Hundeyin? Some actually have said that you have a personal vendetta against the establishment, and that's why you went to dig up some dirty things, about a particular individual that a lot of people call a Milokon. And you just are very fiery. When you try to attack, you don't try to, your violence is such a very, very potent and pungent one. Who is David? And why does David attack people the way he does?
So, do I have a personal vendetta against any Nigerian who has gone through 7 years of what we've gone through in the hands of this establishment and doesn't have a personal vendetta against them isn't a very smart person? Of course, I have a personal vendetta against the establishment. Rightly so. I should. You should too. We all should. Right? Even if we're the ones who got thrown in jail, even if we're the ones who got shot, we've all seen our friends and our family circles and units get smaller and smaller. Everybody has had to start this is the age over again. We've all seen our entire life plans evaporate. When I came back to Nigeria in 2013, this was at the height of Africa Rising. I never came back with any intention of ever leaving again. I came back to Nigeria with the idea that this is it. This is home. This is in fact, when my passport expired in 2015, I didn't renew it until 2018 because between 2015 and 2018, I didn't even physically leave Nigeria to go anywhere, not even to Benin Republic, right? That's what Nigeria was to some of us at the time. So, and then all of a sudden, we just realized that the rug was pulled out from underneath our feet. And one by one, we just started seeing our colleagues at work. One day he's at work, next week he shows up in Toronto, in Calgary. Our families, our aunts, our cousins, our siblings, just here, there. I have 4 siblings, right? My mom and dad had 5 children. Those 4 siblings are spread out across 3 different continents. Some of them I haven't seen or spoken to in years. Right? So if you don't have a personal vendetta against an administration that has done this to you, then I have to question what exactly it is that serves as any kind of motivation for you in life. And then going to the issue of why I engage with a certain robustness. Well, I think people that ask that question are also not aware that the establishment or the powers that be, the people who have sat down and had meetings where they decided to intentionally frustrate you, intentionally keep you poor or impoverish you if you weren't poor, intentionally restrict your access to information, intentionally restrict your access to the global information marketplace, to the global economy, to global capital, to make you small and insignificant in a country that really has no business being small and insignificant. Those people are not polite. Those people don't engage with timidity, right? Those people are not soft and understated. Those people are very unapologetic. Have you ever listened to Bola Tinubu speaking, for example? He's fiercely unapologetic. You saw the recent viral video where he was talking about how when you want to win and when you want power, it's not given a la carte. You have to seize it, you have to grab it, you have to snatch it. And you understood the import of what he was trying to say, that he used the term at all costs. That is how the people with power engage. They do stuff with their full chest, at all costs, at any cost, up to and including your life. So if you want to defend yourself, or if you want to defend people that are important to you, and then you now want to tie one hand behind your back in the name of being civil, being polite, not offending people, not coming across as unduly combative, you are just hamstringing yourself for no reason, and you are giving them an advantage. You are giving yourself a handicap for no sensible reason, right? If you have an enemy, fight your enemy. That's your priority, right? That's your first and only priority at that point in time. If you have an enemy whose interest is in the decimation of your life, the decimation of your freedoms, the decimation of your wealth and your economy, the decimation of your family and friend group, the decimation of your future, your children's future, your priority should not be what people on Twitter will say. That, oh, this one is always sounding angry. This one, every time I see him, is always fighting with somebody. Something must be wrong. The issue must be with him. Why is he always like this? Why is he always like that? If you are involved in a fight with an enemy that has that kind of at all costs mindset, you also have to have an at all cost mindset. That's just basic logic. And I don't know why this seems to be a very difficult concept for people to grasp. That the people, because whether you accept it or not, this is warfare. Whether you accept it or not, you are in a fight. Whether you realize that you're in a fight or not, you are. Wow. Maybe the reason I understand this very clearly is because I grew up in a situation where, my dad was a senior civil servant in Lagos State, and some of the people who you think of as, these statesmen were people that he had a very immediate access to. So I know things about these people, and the way they talk about you, like you are cattle. So, for example, somebody whose name I'm not going to mention, but he's well considered to be a hero of democracy. He has a public holiday, named after him in his honor and whatnot. This person, my dad was part of a meeting where because this person was involved in one of Nigeria's several botched attempts to create a state-controlled monopoly over telephone and internet access, right? I'm sure you know who I'm referring to. And my dad was part of a meeting with this person in the early 90s, where this person brought out a mobile phone. Back then, mobile phones didn't exist in Nigeria, but a very, very select few had mobile phones. They were satellite phones, right? And this person brought it out of his pockets, and he said that this thing looking at here, this thing is not for the masses. It's not for those people, right? That's the mindset that animates this group of people that you are dealing with, right? That's something that you think of as ubiquitous, like your mobile phone today. Like everybody, children have mobile phones. It's not a big deal of any description to have a mobile phone now. But that just about 30 years ago, to some people who are still in power today, this was a thing that you should not have. This is a power that should not be given to you because it's their own exclusive little club. When you are fighting against those kinds of people, what is your problem is whether you are polite or you are understated? Who cares? That's not the point at all.
Let's bring this conversation home, particularly let's center on Obi now. We pray that Obi wins in 2023. Do you see Obi bringing Nigerian youth on board in his administration? Do you think it is going to battle from what the establishment, used to do?
I think the easiest way to answer that question is to look at his precedents, right? So, as you know, this is somebody who is not a career politician. This is someone who has actually built a productive organization, a productive institution outside of government, right? He used to be a bank chairman. He runs a successful trading and manufacturing conglomerate. So this is somebody who clearly has built something, right? There's a video that I saw them flying around where the South African business person, Vusi Tembakwayo, made a statement that the problem with Africa is Africa insists on electing leaders who have created nothing and built nothing, only for them to wonder why when they get into office, they create nothing and build nothing, right? I think some of the people that are on the ballot are people who fit that description, people who have never had any kind of significant reputation or achievements outside of public office, outside of government. Their entire career has been built on or around public funds. This is somebody who has lived actually the majority of his career in the private sector. He has built something, and as you very well know, when you are building in the private sector, the number one consideration is merit, because you are competing. So in the private sector, that is not the place where you can do stuff like an undue emphasis on nepotism, an undue emphasis on ethnic representation. Those considerations have no place in the private sector, because everybody's fighting for survival and increasing their own market share. So that is the space that this person comes from. So from that, it's easy to extrapolate that if this person becomes president, if this person comes into office, that is the animating mindset that he brings with him, where he has a certain KPI to achieve, and what he's looking for is the person who is best positioned to deliver on that KPI. Not who comes from where, not who belongs to which demographic that he identifies with. So other identity politics BS, which has been the bane of Nigerian public service for decades. This is not somebody who comes from that school of thoughts.
Okay, David, very, very soon we'll be rounding off this particular interview, but I want to have your take on this. Should Nigeria get it right in 2023? Should Peter Obi eventually emerge as the president of this nation? What does that portend for Africa? If Nigeria really gets it right, what does it portend for Africa?
What it portends is that potentially you have Africa's largest economy finally starting to course correct, because over the past 7 years, going up to 8 years now, even though nominally Nigeria has remained Africa's largest economy, which by the way is not really an achievement, because it's almost twice as populated as Africa's next most populated country. But even though Nigeria has technically been Africa's largest economy in the past 7 years, proportionally, it has done a lot worse than it was doing even in 2014, right? So Nigeria's GDP has actually declined in US dollar terms since 2014. So if you recall, as at 2014, that Nigeria's GDP was approaching 500 billion. As at 2016, this has shrunk to about 380 billion. Right. So and as of now, it's just crept just a little above 400 billion now. So if Peter Obi becomes president in 2023, the first thing that would do is that it signals to capital, to foreign investment, to business people that Nigeria wants to do business, right? And I think it's very important for people to understand that Nigeria's primary value proposition is not oil. Nigeria's primary value proposition is not any kind of natural resource. Nigeria's primary value proposition is trade, it's business, it's people. That's Nigeria's primary economic value proposition. So if you have somebody whose career has been built on trade, on creating value, becoming president of the country, that in itself sends a signal to the global market that Nigeria is open for business. The other thing it will do, the other significant thing that it will do is that with respect to implementation of some of these things which have been signed, such as the AFCFTA treaty, the ACTA agreement, these things have been signed, but as usual, the political will to follow through on them has been non-existent. And in fact, the Buhari administration has done things that directly violate that treaty, such as the unilateral closure of Nigeria's land borders. Under a Peter Obi presidency, you are almost certain that such a thing would never happen. So again, what that would signal to Nigeria's diplomatic and trade partners across the continent is that this is a country that wants to become more integrated with our economies. This is a country that wants to do business, as against the very country that wants to become this sort of North Korean state. Under a Peter Obi presidency, you won't be seeing things like somebody banning Twitter because he woke up on the wrong side of his bed. These are the things that affect the inflow of capital into Nigeria. And it's also very important for people to understand that in economies like Nigeria, the inflow and outflow of capital are some of the most important economic markers that can basically make or destroy an economy. Because again, you have to bear in mind that the primary value proposition offered by Nigeria is trade. Nigeria is too big to be a resource economy. So,
David, we're grappling with this time constraint. So I would want to just quickly ask you my penultimate question, and it's simple. Let's just say this: if you were to make 3 recommendations to Peter Obi when he becomes president, what would those things be? Just 3.
Well, the first thing would be to conduct wholesale root and branch reform of the Nigerian security services. The Nigerian security services need a huge overhaul. When I say security services, I don't just mean the police and the military. I also mean the intelligence services. Some of these services and agencies have the people there are the same people that were there in the era of Murtala Mohammed, the first era of Obasanjo, Buhari, Babangida. They are still there till date. And the mantra and the mindset that indoctrinated with in the military era, they still have those things to date. So you have a DSS that still thinks of itself primarily as a regime security outfit, for example. So those are the things that need to be addressed with security. The second thing would be implementation of the ACTA agreements and any other Pan-African trading agreements, things that make trading and travel and flow of money easier within the ECOWAS region and Africa as a whole, because Nigeria can only benefit from that. That's the second thing. Integrate Nigeria into Africa's economy more very aggressively. And then the third thing would be to make tech the centerpiece of his policy outlook.
Beautiful one from you, David. And I really have enjoyed my time with you. You, like I said before now, there's a way you make a conversation with you enjoyable. More like one is having the best of cuisines and you're spoiled for choice. You're just looking for the one to pick, from. It's such a beauty to do this with you. But this is my last question as we take our leave this evening. When are we expecting another banger from you? I know that a couple of weeks ago you dropped, the one that has to do with Waju. Are we looking at having something new, from you that would also still, kind of be pungent and potent and maybe a little bit of bellicosness? Are we looking at that in the next couple of days?
I mean, there might be something before the end of the year. But the banger, as you call it, you are likely to see more and more of those in 2023. Okay. Because I think I can announce this now. I recently took in a little bit of investment into West Africa Weekly to basically work on the visual side of things, primarily the video side of things. So you might be seeing more and more visual content, especially going into 2023. And hopefully I might be able to expand the team. So yeah, there will be more of those quote unquote bangers in 2023. So Merry Christmas.
Thank you so much, David. Merry Christmas to you too. It's been an awesome time with you this evening. And I cannot wait to have you back on this particular show so that we could engage more. Thank you for your time, David. And I wish you a very blissful night, even as you go take your deserved rest this evening. Thank you so much. And guys, it's been an honor playing host to this very, very smart, sagacious, handsome young Nigerian who is really doing everything to make sure that Nigeria gets better. I'll tell you this for free, guys. A New Deal is where you should be. It's a platform where we talk about issues that affect Nigeria and how we could have a rebirth of the nation in such a way that people across the globe, when they talk about Nigeria, they have positives more than negatives to actually say. It's been an honor hosting this particular topic this day. Don't forget that today's topic is the end of the old order and the birth of the new. My name is Waju Akin-Emmanuels. Hopefully next week I'll be here. Until then, you have a beautiful night and please stay out of trouble. Don't forget to Peter Obi has to be president, so go get your PBC. See you some other time. Have a great evening.